Rise up!
This is the Rise Up See Red podcast, all about the Arizona Cardinals and the NFL, featuring insider and outsider perspectives. Enjoy the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Now here are your hosts, Jess Root and Seth Cox.
Hello, Arizona Cardinals fans, and welcome to the latest edition of the Rise Up See Red podcast, the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. I'm your host, Jess Root from CardsWire.com, USA Today's NFL wire site that covers the Arizona Cardinals. And this is a special show. This is not one of the regular shows with my co-host, Seth Cox, as we will record our first of 2 or 3 shows that we have heading into week 1. This is a bit of a season preview with a special guest from Covers.com, Jason Logan, who recently wrote betting previews for pretty much probably every NFL team that covers the map.
Every single NFL team. Yeah, I was trying to get them done before the long weekend, right? Because then come Monday morning, it's all week 1 focus stuff. So it was a haul. I came back from vacation and just put my head down and for like 3 weeks just pound out 32 team previews, and not just like team previews, but team betting previews. This is a different way to look at these teams. So.
And so episode 691, we're going to talk Cardinals and the sports book world, the sports betting world, which Seth and I do dabble in ourselves as a little bit of degenerates here. But so for the casuals, for the degenerates, we've got information for you. Welcome aboard, Jason, for the show coming on. You were pointing out that you and I have probably crossed paths in the last 15 years. Even though never on the show, you said I probably wrote some content for you way back in my SB Nation days.
That's right. Yeah, we used to do it for Monday Night Football. We used to go out and seek like specific team bloggers to kind of debate who was going to cover on Monday Night Football. And I think you were kind enough to help us out on a few of those Monday games. So appreciate that. Long time coming about that. It would have been like between 2010 and 2015, but yeah.
Well, the Cardinals coming into the 2025 season have high hopes. They do. They do not have, like, from the outside looking in, there are not major expectations of them. The expectations are coming more from the inside of the building and within the fan base, because in 2 years with Jonathan Gannon as their head coach, they went from the 4-13 dumpster fire of 2022 to a 4-13. I described them as a good bad team. They were a bad team. They were a bad roster. 2023, they were a bad team, but they were a good bad team because they barely lost. They were competitive. They probably should have had 2 other wins in there. They shouldn't have lost that game to the Giants. And Matt Prater Matt Prater missed the only field goal of his career in the final 2 minutes of a game-winning or game-tying field goal in the final 2 minutes of football game, or in overtime. First miss ever, but that miss was following the script that fans had, so they could lock in the 4th overall pick and take Marvin Harrison. So they went from 4-13 being a dumpster fire to 4-13 as a competitive bad team to 8-9 last season, which they were honestly. They were 6-4, but they were a perfectly mediocre team because they beat the non-playoff teams. And with the exception of the one unexcusable loss to the Carolina Panthers, 8 of their 9 losses, so all their losses except for Carolina, came against teams with double-digit wins and in the playoffs. So they were a perfectly mediocre team last year. And you wrote about it in your preview that it was kind of the tale of 2 seasons for Kyler Murray. The first 10 games and then the final 7. And Murray's play kind of put it, whether you could say it was Murray, but it coincided with that. What did you see from them last year from a betting standpoint?
Like you said, you're always looking, as I do these previews and get ready for week 1 of the NFL season and so forth. I am looking for bad teams that can be good bets, teams that are improved, have some key things that are going their way heading into the season, be it quarterback play or their pass rush or maybe a change in coordinator or something like that. I'm always looking for a team that is better than expected, and that's where you're going to find point spread value. And Arizona was that last year. I mean, they came out of the gate, looked really, really strong. I think they went 7-3 or 7-2 right out of the gate. They also covered those spreads in those games as well too. And then you'll see market correction. And I think market correction and a downtick in play from this team and Kyler Murray making some mistakes along the way, it all kind of happened at once. And then a lot of the value just fell out of the bottom for Arizona. But in terms of a fast start and a great bet early on in the season, they were just that. And I think they have the potential to be that again, seeing how this opening schedule lines up.
Yes. You look at their first 6 games of the season. They play well. I think when we get to the season totals, the Cardinals have a very favorable schedule in the fact that they play the NFC South and the AFC South. And while the NFC South has the Buccaneers are expected to be solid. The Falcons, you never know about the Falcons. But then in the AFC South, it is the Texans and then the Texans and a bunch of not great teams. Like when you look at the Colts, like they improved the quarterback situation with Daniel Jones.
Did they? I said with the Colts, they're either like Anthony Richardson is either that far gone where he's not. And the thing is, like week 1, Anthony Richardson, the last 2 years is awesome because he's healthy, right? Like week 1, Anthony Richardson is much different than week 2 or week 3 Anthony Richardson. So I look at that and say, okay, is he that far gone where he's that bad and they can't trust him? Or are they trying to hope to do what Carolina did with Bryce Young? And it's like, you're benched, you're not starting, you're not meeting expectations. And that's what happened with Bryce Young at the beginning of last year. And then Andy Dalton got hurt and they're like, okay, prove it. And he came in and Bryce Young was fantastic. You said a loss to the Carolina Panthers. And I was like, well, that's not a bad loss because Carolina actually was a pretty good team towards the last 2/3 of last year. But maybe that's what the Colts are trying to do with Anthony Richardson, is light a fire under his ass and take a page of the Carolina Panthers playbook.
So the Cardinals opened the season favored in 5 of their first 6 games. The only games that at least when lines came out initially back a few months ago, they were favored against the Saints, the Panthers, the Seahawks at home, Tennessee, and Indianapolis, with the only game where they are underdogs in their first 6 is on the road against the San Francisco 49ers. You pegged that Tennessee game as a kind of a hot spot where you can really look at the Cardinals as a winner, didn't you?
Yeah, I mean the Titans are in a tough spot there. They're going to be hitting the road for the second straight week after playing Houston on Sunday. And Tennessee is just going to be, I think, awful. Last year, Tennessee was one of those teams that I had pegged as like, hey, this could be a bad team. That could be a good bet. And for like the first 5 or 6 weeks, I just was almost blind on Tennessee, and they killed me, and they killed me. But Arizona has that mini bye to prepare, and after playing at Seattle on Thursday, so they're going to have a little extra prep, a little extra rest, which is always nice earlier in the season because you'll see those, the nuts and bolts that have to be tightened early on, and they'll be able to do that. So definitely they have the rest advantage in this one. And this is one of those spreads that if you can find a 5.5 right now, I would say go take it, because we talk about how strong Arizona could be out of the gate and how bad Tennessee is just going to be overall. And this is kind of hanging at a dead number of 5.5, just below that key number of 6. So if all goes according to plan, and you look at this and say, well, the Cardinals could be realistic, 3-1 at this point, and Tennessee might be 4-0. Or sorry, 0-4. And so this 5.5 line, I don't expect there to be there when we come around to week 5.
We have already seen the shift in the game against the season opener against the Saints, where it was a 3.5 point spread to start, shifted to 5.5 sometime in the offseason. I think that was after the car news.
Yeah.
And more recently, it's even pushed to 6.5. In a week 1 game on the road, is how good about, like, my expectations for the Cardinals, that should be easily a double-digit win. The talent gap between the Cardinals roster and the Saints roster is drastic. But you are pushing the six and a half, and you're getting to that touchdown line, which makes it a little bit, NFL games are known for one-score games,
Yep.
especially late in the game. So, home openers are always a little tricky because you get the extra juice from the crowd. What do you think about that opening line?
Well, I mean, if we want to talk about the car, like moving from 3.5, it was at 5.5 for a lot of the summer. And then as we get closer and the Saints realize like, oh, we don't have a quarterback. I guess Rattler's our quarterback. That move to 6 and 6.5, that's a significant move because you're going through, you're getting off of that kind of dead zone, getting to 6 and then seeing it go to 6.5. They're going to be a very popular teaser bet. They're going to be the number one survivor pick. That's for sure. And people have just kind of, eating up that New Orleans is going to be terrible. On paper, yeah, it looks like, given the defensive improvements that we see from Arizona, what they can do on offense, which is very, very, I think can be very good and very dynamic and balanced and give defenses fits. You start flirting with like 6.5 this early in the season. I'm not sure because week one's a tough week. Your defense usually has the leg up from the offense. The offense still has to, get its timing and momentum going. Quarterbacks have to sync up with receivers. So you're asking Arizona to score a lot of points on the road to cover a 6.5.
We look at last season. What did you find from them last season in terms of how they went, as you noted, 11-6 against the spread last year? And then you talked about how that version of Murray never came back. They were 6-4 overall, and in heading into the Week 10 bye, they were leading the division, and basically all they needed to do was beat Seattle once.
And had good, like it wasn't like they had an easy schedule out of the gate, but they took Buffalo to the limit. They had a
bear of a schedule coming out the gate.
They beat the crap out of the Rams. They took Detroit toe to toe. They lost to a Washington team that was, we see how quality Washington was, but they beat San Francisco and they stood in there against some good teams like, the Chargers and the Bears were, serviceable to a certain extent. So I think one of it was kind of whatever flip with Murray, like when you have the turnovers stack up like he has, that just kills drives. And two, the defense last year was good, but they weren't great. It was that Gannon, like, protect, don't let anything in behind you. We'll bend, but don't break. And that was it. Like they didn't do anything game changing. There was no, like the pressure wasn't good enough to create turnovers and fumbles and sacks and give the ball back, give extra possessions to the offense. That was kind of the thing. They would back it up and slowly give away yards and bend, but don't break and get in the goal. And, they were respectable in the red zone. Did all right on third downs, but there was nothing dangerous about that defense. And I find that's why I'm higher on Arizona this year, because they recognized that and they made a move to do it. I said in the lead-in for it, I said they're kind of striking while the iron is hot because we don't know what we're going to get from San Francisco. It could be another mash unit again, which you can't handicap for. But I said Matt Stafford is like a hard sneeze away from being on the disabled list. He is essentially, like, his back is in bad shape. And then what are you going to get from Sam Darnold in a Seattle team that's kind of gutted? You're going to get a Mike McDonald defense, which was great and looked really good in the second half of last year, although they did play some teams. So I'm still kind of jury's out on that. So it could be a very, very high thing if Arizona can, one, limit the offensive turnovers, and two, create some defensive takeaways. And that's kind of what they're set up for here, bringing in those guys up front to create some pass rush that wasn't there last year.
I described the defense last year. They were a scrappy, undermanned team that was really disciplined. But yeah, like all the important metrics, they weren't good at. They were not good on third down. They were not good at pressure. They were not good at taking the ball away. And then the couple of metrics that I looked at is that they were last and second to last in plays allowed per drive, and time allowed per drive, and so they were scrappy. They looked like they were, but they would just keep tick tick tick. And the saving grace for them was they were good on fourth down. Like if that happened, they were good on fourth down, which saved them. And I think personally, I think a lot of those high leverage situations defensively, their defense was unreliable, especially late in the year. What led to forced throws, like if you look at some of those interceptions that Kyler had, there was a fourth down throw that was a pick six against Seattle. You have to make, if it's fourth down, you have to make a throw. That was a bad throw. He had the pick against Minnesota. Again, that was a fourth down throw after you just given up the game-winning field goal. 8 of those 8 interceptions, I think I broke down as they were like 4 of them were like you had to make a throw, and there was it just didn't work like that. But let's look like coming up next on the Rise of Hero podcast. Best Cardinals talking the web. Let's move on and talk about like this season and the bets to make for the Cardinals. That's coming up next on Rise of Red. We're back on the Rise of Red podcast, the Best Cardinals talking the web, talking to Jason Logan from Covers.com, who has his picks and predictions for all 32 NFL teams. But we're talking about the Arizona Cardinals for the 2025 season, and we look at this, and you've got your best bets are one that I think is kind of a slam dunk, and the other, which probably won't make Cardinals fans super happy. The first one, and this is the slam dunk, is that the Kyler Murray over 33,375 and a half passing yards. At that's not great value. That's a -110, but a healthy Kyler Murray is going to be right at around 4,000 passing yards, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm surprised too. Like he hasn't gone for over 4,000 in his career, but it's been injuries. Like you said, a healthy Murray gets there. And you look at some of the teams, like he could get very, very close to this by the time we hit Halloween. Like based on some of these defenses, NOLA, terrible defense. Carolina, defensive progress, but still gives up a ton of yards. I mean, they gave up a ton of yards last year. They can't be that much more. Like they can't be any worse than that, but they're still not going to be great. Even San Francisco's defense, people are kind of pointing to it and being like, it's definitely not the same that it's good that it was over the last few years.
Starters, they lost so many starters.
Gone. Yeah, and Tennessee and Indianapolis are not going to be good. And then they played my Cowboys in Week 9, and even with Parsons, that defense was going to be bad. Give up a ton of big plays. So things were set up pretty well for Kyler Murray. The other thing that I do like about them is that they don't play a whole lot of games outdoors. Everything's indoors. I think there's only maybe, I think I added up maybe 4 outdoor games all season, I want to say. And so that's a lot of fast track. That's a lot of like indoor. There's no wind. It's perfect conditions. And you'll see an uptick in points when you're just playing those indoor games compared to open air stadiums. So I think all those things kind of line up for Murray as well too. And then he has some great weapons around him. Harrison Jr., he'll continue. He's a second-year receiver now. They'll continue to grow, and then McBride has just been a godsend for that team as well.
Yes.
Yeah. As someone who I almost named my son Witten. I can appreciate a good tight end. So,
if we're talking Cowboys tight ends, because the Cardinals had 0, like we had a tight end curse until McBride, and that dates back to when we let Jay Novacek go and Robbie Weld go to the Cowboys. Both of them ended up with the Cowboys, and Novacek had himself a very nice
tight end, man. Yeah, he did. He was one of my favorite players on this team as a young boy. I was loved my.
You just revealed yourself to our fans as a Cowboys fan.
Yeah, whatever. You know what? My fandom has died a slow, long death. Like I've worked with Covers for over 20 years now, and it's just like I used to get really worked up on Sundays, and I honestly I very much separate the sports better and separate my fandom.
Oh, well, you have to, because sports betting is not for the heart.
Yeah, I will find myself betting against.
You don't want to. You won't make money with your heart on the bets.
Well, go read my Cowboys preview, and you'll see how I feel about the Cowboys this year. And that was before. That was like my first one that I wrote before the whole Parsons debacle.
So the other one, you said that the best bets are the Cardinals to finish third in the NFC West at plus 220. That hurts. In terms of a bet, I get it, but that hurts.
it's and you and I said this before we went on. I can't handicap for injuries that haven't happened yet, right? So the Niners on paper are very, very strong, pending injury concerns, which is something they have not been good at avoiding the last few years, right? But I can't all of a sudden discount them because I think Ayuk's not going to be able to perform at the same level. And the same can be said for Matt Stafford. We talked about Matt Stafford, and his back issues. If he goes down, that team is Dunsky. They're done. I don't think they're not set up to succeed without him. And then you look at Seattle and a very good defense. Hopefully they can pick up where they left off. I like Sam Darnold as a QB. I liked him last year. I thought he was going to be fine in Minnesota, but he doesn't have the setup that he had in Minnesota last year.
No.
So I mean, this division could very much, like I have it going Niners, Rams, Arizona, Seattle. It could very much flip upside down, and it would not surprise me whatsoever based on things. But it's for me, what led me to take them third, and I do like Arizona. Like I said, I think they're a bet on team in terms of ATS. But what hurt me towards the end was that tail end of the season. They play 3 of the final 4 on the road, and you have some teams that could be very much in the playoff hunt there. You're at Houston in week 15. You're hosting Atlanta, who's a team that could be playing for its playoff life in that one. You're going to Cincinnati, a cold weather game in week 17. And then you're at the Rams for what could very well be a win and get in situation for both of those teams. And we talked about how good their promise looks in the first few weeks, being favorites in 5 of the first 6 games. Well, they're underdogs a lot in the back end of the season. Not massive underdogs. And you look at the spreads, we're looking at 9 spreads of a field goal. So basically between -3 and +3, which tells you that odds makers are kind of on the fence about this. You start seeing 3.5s, things like that, 2.5s. It tells a lot about a team. But when you have a lot of those teams just, sticking between a field goal, those are toss-up games in the eyes of the odds makers. It will change a lot. And we're looking at, some really tough games to finish out the season. And the Rams aren't as backed up against it, I would say. At least they have that home game against Arizona at the end of the season. And that's a big one. It could be a very big one.
Well, those final 6 games for the Cardinals, it backs up the 6 games. In the final 6 games, they play 4 against division winners from last year, 2 against the Rams, 1 against Tampa, 1 against Houston, and then they've got the 2 games against Atlanta and Cincinnati, who were in the mix till week 18. So that is, and the Cardinals' history of end of season in recent history also not good.
Not good.
So I understand. I was on a show for, I think it was the Hour Lots podcast that I just did, and I look at this team, the Cardinals, and say they won 8 games last year with a bad defense and a good offense, and they won 8 games last year, and their defense is significantly better talent-wise than it was a year ago, and their offense is at least as good because basically they brought everyone back, which means I'm like 8 wins last year. This year should be 10-11, and I, in terms of a value pick. And it's looking at the first and second. And I can't remember what sports book it was that we were looking at, but that was plus 1,100 to go Rams Cardinals first second, and plus 1,300 to do Cardinals Rams, both for with which we're looking at, and we're like, that would, both of those bets are good to make, because if you hit one, then you hit big on one of those, because of that. And we were both on a little bit down on San Francisco, not necessarily for the help, but especially early on. They don't have Brandon Ayuk probably for the first 6 weeks of the season. Juwan Jennings is healthy, but they also don't have Deebo Samuel. They do have a significant changeover on defense. And while Robert Asala is back, how long will it take for that new group of players to catch on? And so, but honestly, I think the NFC West is going to have basically 4 teams between 8 and 12 wins, probably.
Yeah. I mean, they could. Arizona could win. Like I said, it could come down to that final game. They could win 10 games and still be scratching and clawing. And then you look at what's happening in the NFC north. And you're hoping that, if that's a Detroit, Green Bay, Minnesota setup, then you might get edged in one of those final wild card spots. That's the thing. I could fully see them going over their win total of 8.5 and still not qualifying for the postseason.
Yeah, well, 100%. So I do like the over 8.5, but I like a little even better, just a little better, because it jumps. Was it plus one? Probably about plus 120 is the over 9.5. Is that I'm seeing on some sports books?
Yeah, you could take those all, like they'll have the different bars or different alt totals and stuff like that. Yeah, I mean, I think they got 10 wins in them. I mean, they definitely have, they can get out to that fast start, and if momentum means something, then that could be a big thing that carries them the rest of the way. But just knowing the team's tendencies over the last few years, and I will say, like, that week 8 bye is great. Right after that, a little bit of a reassessment. They actually got a good bye where you look at some of these other teams. Like, I think San Francisco has a late bye. They're like week 14. Seattle's about the same. And I think the Rams, it looks like everyone's off around that same time except for San Francisco. Yeah. And being the injury, snake bitten team that they are, like that could really just kill their chances right off the bat.
You're right that what will lose bets, Murray's miscues. Murray, for his career, has been pretty turnover averse, except for those final games, the 7 games of last year. How do you view that half of last season compared to the totality of his career in terms of that?
He's been good, but not quite good enough. And I felt
that's the hardest thing for Cardinals fans, is that they had Patrick Mahomes expectations, which was completely unfair, because he did exceed all expectations that were of him years 1, 2, and 3. And then from there, it's sort of, he's been good.
And his rookie season was, I remember, like, his rookie season, there was a lot of doubters that, didn't think he should have went number 1 overall. And he had a great rookie season. And then it's kind of, we haven't seen him we've seen like little hints back at those same levels.
2020 had a 5-game stretch of looking like an MVP. The first half of 2021, he was the MVP favorite. Yeah. And well, here's the thing. Here's and this is, I know, I if you've ever paid attention, I am a more optimistic fan, because I grew up here, so I'm a Cardinals fan. But at the same time, I look at this 2025 team and compare it to talent-wise 2021, because 2021, what shot them out of the gate was not necessarily Murray's play, although he looked like an MVP for the first half of that year, was the defense outperforming expectations. And the defense played so well, which led to Murray playing really well, because he didn't have those high leverage situations. And I look at this defense, especially early on in the season, we could do that. Is that if the offense, which is a top 10 offense in a lot of metrics, just takes a tick forward in consistency, and the defense goes from being below average to a little bit above average, you're taking those situations that Murray was in the end of last season, which led to those turnovers, he's not going to be in. And I have the potential. I look at 2025 being, if we're looking at what Jonathan Gannon's built over that the next step would be to do something like they did in 2021.
Yeah, trenches. I mean, if you look at all the top teams, you look at Philly and you look at the Lions and you look at Baltimore, all really good in the trenches, right? And we talked about how improved the defensive line could be for Arizona, and their offensive line, I don't think, gets enough credit as well, too. Just sturdy and steady, which is more than a lot of teams can say. And if they can, like you said, avoid those high leverage situations where, you've fallen behind on the score sheet and now you have to go pass heavy, it takes away from them, because they are a nice dynamic attack that you don't know what's coming at you. You can run with Connor. You can hit short hits to McBride. You can go downfield. They have to keep the defense guessing. And in those situations where they have to go pass heavy and they can bring pressure on Murray, knowing that he has to drop back and make a throw, then you're painting yourself into a corner. don't think we're going to see that early on because of the matchups. It will be interesting to see when they start running into some tougher defenses. Especially it's really that final stretch where the defenses could get a little, Tampa Bay's not that, like they're a terrible pass defense. So they're set up well here. But again, it's like I said, it's on Murray to not kind of Kyler Murray this one. It's just it's really in his hands. The offensive line is there. You have your guys. You have a great. I mean, the clock's ticking on James Conner. How long can he continue to be, productive? I don't think anyone expected him to be as productive as he's been. For what which he's been with them 2-3 years now since coming
since
over?
2021. Since 2021, this will be year 5.
Yeah. No, and I don't think anyone expected that. He was coming over from Pittsburgh, if I'm correct, right? Yeah. Was solid and sound, but he's been a monster for them. But how old is he?
He turned 30 this year.
Oh, so there it is. So you're smelling you're picking up the milk carton and going, no, this running back's 30 years old. That's not a good one.
That's why they hope that the goal is to increase Trey Benson's role to counteract that. But so the other thing that I wanted to talk, we were talking a little bit before the show, was the big news that came last week, which was the Micah Parsons trade, which it impacts the Cardinals doubly because the Cardinals play the Packers and they play the Cowboys. Now they were 1.5 point underdogs for both of those games when the spreads first came out. But I haven't seen any sports books that go out past week 6. So I haven't seen how the betting lines have been affected by this trade. You were talking to me, what can we expect? I guess and a lot of things were changed between now and week 7, now and week 9, but just the initial impact of Parsons, what is that doing to those early games for Green Bay and for Dallas? So if we're looking ahead, Cardinals fans, what can we expect from the perception for the Cardinals games again in those matchups?
Sure. Well, I'll kind of preface everything with saying, usually defensive players are not worth anything through the spread. You've got your quarterbacks, you have your elite wide receivers and running backs, and maybe if a tight end like a Kelsey or a top tight end would go down, those are the guys that would impact lines. Rarely do you see a defensive player. In my 20 years of working with covers, there's been maybe half a dozen guys. We're talking like TJ Watt, a JJ Watt, an Aaron Donald. Those guys, big time game disruptors. They were actually worth a point, maybe a half a point. I know it doesn't sound like a lot compared to what they are, but that's the way that NFL spreads are put together. They're just not worth that much. And with Parsons, we saw some significant movement. It's probably a little bit of knee-jerk reaction because everyone is running. So odds makers will have their initial adjustment, and they may say, okay, we're going to take Green Bay from 1.5 to 2, 2-point favorite. Now they have Parsons, and then the bets come in and they say, okay, well, we got to move it to 2.5. So that's kind of, it's one, the odds makers reaction, and 2, market manipulation by the sports bettors as well too. But looking at some of the lines here, I mean, you're seeing a full point, a half point, sometimes 1.5 points on differences in lines for the Cowboys and the Green Bay Packers. So if we look at week 1 versus Detroit for Green Bay, they went from -1.5 to -2.5. And for week 2, they went from -2.5 to -3 versus Washington. We're seeing about a point difference in each of those moves. For Dallas, the week 1 line is a bit misleading because that did open 6.5, and in the midst of all of the contract dispute stuff, it did move to 7, and now it's at 7.5. So it's a full point move. But the one that really jumps out to me is this week 2 game. It opened -4.5. It's now -3 for the Cowboys hosting the Giants, who are a team that a lot of people have their eyes on as a bet on team, an improved team. They've improved at the quarterback position, and their pass rush could be elite. 2 very important parts. But that's a 1.5 difference. That's probably the biggest move I've ever seen for a defensive player. So to look at that and put it up against what the Green Bay game could be and the Dallas game could be, I mean, you're safe to say half a point. So you could say now they're going to be 2-point underdogs versus Green Bay, and
it might be pick 'em
a pick 'em at Dallas. However, after you start factoring in the things like, oh, well, Arizona could be 3-4 right out of the gate,
Right.
or it could be undefeated by the time they get to Green Bay. Like, it's not out of the question. Just
no,
look at the
it's not
quarterbacks that they
crazy.
play.
It's not crazy.
No, and it's like you go into San Francisco, you're a favorite against Seattle at home, big favorite against Tennessee. We talked about the Daniel Jones and Anthony Richardson deal in Indianapolis is a bit of a mess. Right now we could say, okay, well, maybe it's Arizona plus 2.5, just under that key number of a field goal. Okay, well, if they come in and look really, really strong right out of the gate, that could go back to the 1.5 that we see by the time we get around to week 7. But I would say the Parsons is worth, in the eyes of odds makers, half to a 1.5, or to a point to the spread. I'd say around a point.
So, kind of wrapping things up, you have your 2 best bets, which were Kyler Murray over his passing yard total and 3rd in the NFC West. If you're making bet, like if you're looking at some of these, take or pass, do you take over 8.5 wins or under 8.5 wins for the Cardinals?
It's minus 115. I'd kind of want to shop. I'd love it at like flat minus 110. I want to say over 8.5. And that's factoring in the fragility of this division. Yeah. It's factoring Matt Stafford's aching bones and the Niners being snake bitten. It's definitely not out of the realm of possibility that they win 9 games. Especially, you're going to get probably 4 or 5 wins right out of the gate. Boom. So I'll say over. It was minus 115. Yeah.
Okay. What about the value of winning the division at plus 425? Not necessarily making it for, hey, you're putting a lot of your eggs in this basket, but value-wise, is that a pick worth making?
It's not like taking Dallas to win the NFC East. It's not like taking the Raiders to win the AFC. Like, I'd have to go and look at some of like the comparable division winning odds there and say like, because they're not far out of it and they're going to be really, really good. I would say take it now. If you are looking to bet it, don't wait, because when they win 4 games out of the gate,
that'll drop.
It's going to shrink. It's going to shrink significantly. So if you do like that, get it now and go around and find it at the best spot that you can, because it's not going to be there.
What do you have any other? Because you put 2 best bets. Were there any that you considered that you didn't publish?
It was. I mean, really the hardest thing was figuring out whether they were going to finish second, or hell, like I was flirting with, like, I could take them to win this division as just like an outright, because I did take San Francisco over 11.5 in the preview. I didn't say they're going to win the division, but I did say I was going to take the Rams to finish second. But all of that is really based on not handicapping injuries that haven't happened yet. And I don't, I can't predict things that haven't happened
yet. Right. It doesn't make sense to do.
And when I add up all the things that haven't happened yet, I see Arizona is a very good competitive team. That it might fall a little bit short based on that closing schedule just being very, very difficult.
Awesome. Well, you can find Jason's stuff over at covers.com. I'll have a link in the podcast episode info. I will also have this up on CardsWire as well, so you will be able to, whether you're hearing it through just the podcast or coming across it from CardsWire, there will be a place for you to read it. Jason, thank you so much for your time. Even though it is not super optimistic for Cardinals fans, we understand. I
think it is. I think it is. Like, I think it's just that it could be amazing. It could be a division title. But you will not.
I mean, you have to, like,
the Cards have to fall their way, to use a really bad pun. How about that?
Yes, that's true. Well, and the truth is like, if you're handicapping the division, you can't go by vibes. You have to look. You can't really go by vibes. And I will say, vibes suggest here, and this is more or less because of the trending of Jonathan Gannon as a head coach and the things that they've done, is that they should improve. They should improve, and because we haven't seen anything to suggest that they're not going to improve. But when you are looking at from the outside in, you have a Rams team that with Matthew Stafford looks really, really good. They went from an aging over a hill team to a team that has a whole bunch of young stars almost overnight.
But that was the thing. And I remember listening to like the Matt Stafford interviews in like training camp last year. And he was just like, he walked into the locker room and everyone's like, hey, are you on Instagram? Are you on this? He's like, what's that? I don't know what that is. Like, he was talking about just how out of touch he is with his teammates. But that was a team that caught hot at the end of last year and rode that momentum. And they're always like, the Rams are always going to have, as long as Stafford and McVay are on the field together, they're going to have the better QB in most matchups, and they're going to have the best head coach in the NFL, hands down. In most, I'll put Sean McVay up against any head coach because you just see what he does I don't think you can argue that. He's just made lemonade every single year out of sometimes some lemons. So they're always going to have that. And I base it upon, like, not because we're getting back into it here, but the Rams are favorites in 13 games and the Niners are favorites in 15 games. And then you have Seattle and you have the Cardinals being favorites in 7 of their 17 games. So I'm basing it on like, this is what the market is saying. And should everything go according to plan, it will, but not everything goes according to plan in this division. So
yeah. So don't hate Jason. He's just running numbers, guys.
And I just lost Micah Parsons. Come on, guys. So like I'm feeling that one. That was I don't think I talked for about 24 hours after that happened.
That's no good. Hey, the drama as a Cardinals fan, who Cardinals fans traditionally hate the Cowboys, dating back to those NFC East days.
You love to see it.
We love it. You love to see it. You love to see Jerry Jones messing things up. Well, Jason, thank you so much for your time. You can find this is episode 691. You can find this as always. Head over to covers.com, which honestly, I'll tell you this, covers.com gives you some of the best betting coverage you can find. Sportsbook Wire, my work over there, that is what we use with our previews. We go to Covers and look at the previous matchups. They have injury data. They have links to all the previous games. They've got it's all the stats. Covers, fantastic site.
Yeah, and free too. And there's no sub or anything. It's all free, like which is nuts. It's absolutely nuts that site is free. And I've worked there for 20 years, and I'm just like, we're just giving it away.
Yeah. That's good. Awesome. Well, thank you, Jason, for your much time. That'll wrap up this edition of the show. We'll be back in a couple of days with me and Seth getting ready for week 1. Thanks for listening. As always, we'll be back again soon.
Thanks for listening to the latest edition of the Rise Up, See Red podcast. Listen to previous episodes and subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, Audioboom, or many other podcast platforms so shows are delivered directly to your mobile device. Please give the show a 5-star rating and always support the sponsors who support the show. We'll be back soon for the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Rise up, Red Sea, be red, see red, and of course, rise up, see red.